Well, thanks for joining us again today, folks. It's post 1 day after President Trump's big speech at Davos, and amazing how quickly markets react if a bit of calm returns. And Trump, of course, saying that he's ruled out military intervention in Greenland, and right away the stock market began to improve a little bit, not a ton, but a bit. He's ruled that out, and he's also made an announcement about a board of peace being established for Gaza. 26 countries have signed on so far, so broadening out the number of people and groups that will be involved in getting peace in Gaza. Kind of fascinating. It's of the 26 countries, many of them are actually Muslim countries, and they're working on the Gaza problem. That's a bit of a breakthrough, and a little bit sad that the EU nations are still saying they don't want any part of being on the board of peace for Gaza. They're not committing to anything. They're not saying they have to sign. They're just saying they want to be part of the peace process. Even Prime Minister Carney from Canada looked like, it's being reported, he kind of ran out of the Davos meeting after he had made his speech. There was lots of opportunity to meet with President Trump. There were social gatherings, etc. And Prime Minister Carney being pictured as fleeing the meeting after he's made an announcement about drawing so much closer to China. So some real disappointments there, and we're just going to have to see where that all goes. In Canada, there is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and his name is Lloyd Axworthy. I've known Lloyd Axworthy, don't know him well, but I worked for him on a few things in the past. And he is a long-term, forever liberal, large and small L liberal, and criticizing Mark Carney for Mark Carney drawing so close to China and pulling away from the U.S. And as the former minister, Lloyd Axworthy, said, this ends about 80 years of tradition of Canada being a supporter of human rights by Prime Minister Carney drawing so close, even strategically. They talk about strategic sharing with China, a real concern here. But mainstream media in Canada is so completely devoted and supported to federal Liberals, because the Liberals fund the mainstream media to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. They are largely not willing to report some of the concern about Prime Minister Carney saying we should draw closer in Canada, we should draw closer to China and move away from the U.S. Now, the other thing that Canada is committed to under Prime Minister Carney, it's being reported that Carney is actively considering sending troops to Greenland. Now, this is after President Trump has said there's going to be no military action from the U.S. in Greenland, and we certainly would not and are not committing troops to a far more serious situation, and that's Russia invading Ukraine. We're not committing troops there. But again, we're not quite sure why Prime Minister Carney thinks that poking not just one, but both eyes of the U.S. continually, daily, is somehow going to help Canada. And he's talking about boots, Canadian boots on the ground in Greenland, and even the U.S. is not being that militaristic. So some interesting stuff there. Maybe that's why BMO, one of the major banking institutions in Canada and respected around the world, is continuing to say that Canada's economy continues to grow softer, continues to stagnate. And in the report, they said, their January report, they said this continues a 10-year decline in economic strength in Canada. So for over 10 years, the economy has been going down, kind of coincides with about the time Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got in, bringing in highly socialistic policies related to our economy. So not a good thing there. And BMO also reporting to and pointing to stubborn high levels of tax and the regulatory regime, regulations being overly suffocating. We need regulations, but they're saying, and as I've been saying, it's gone too far. Well, the price of silver has rocketed up over 200%, 200% since a year ago. It's completely unheard of. It has never taken a surge like that in history. What I want to just point out there, that first of all, to say, yes, we need financial analysts and we look to analysts for advice, but be careful, because nobody, I'm saying nobody, not one analyst was predicting a year ago that silver was going to rocket up to over $95 US an ounce. They simply did not see it coming. Some of the really bold predictors last January said maybe $50 range. Nobody predicted it would hit almost 100. So just all I'm saying there is keep that in mind when you're looking and somebody's saying, invest with me, take my advice. Yeah, that's okay, and look at that and, consider their track record. But remember, not one of them was able to predict what silver was going to do. You would have been very rich if you'd put a few $1,000 into silver a year ago. The thing that's got people upset in Canada is that the federal government refuses to put silver on Canada's critical mineral list. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, the government of Canada, the federal Liberals, have made a risky choice over the last year or so. They've said they'll be the ones who can predict what prices of what metals will go up. And if you can get your metal or your mine listed on the critical mineral list, that means you can get your project, your mining project, fast-tracked, and maybe even get some assistance. So getting a certain mineral listed on the critical minerals list, very important. And once again, Canada refusing, because they didn't see this coming with silver, and they refuse even today to put silver on the critical minerals list, showing again that government usually does not know how to predict things as well as the competitive entrepreneurial forces of the private sector do. And silver, of course, yes, is great to put in your bank account and in your security box if you're looking for increases in a precious metal, but very needed for the production of electric vehicles, very needed for all of the construction and work that goes into development of AI broadly. And here Canada is lead-footed by not getting silver onto the critical minerals list and not even coming close to guessing that it was going to increase in price. We'll talk about being able to see things on a good news front. As we all know, anybody who ages, and I guess I'm one of those, macro degeneration of the eye is a very serious problem. Millions of people suffering from that every year, and it's irreversible and leads to blindness, and it happens slowly, and it's very depressing, and nothing can be done. Well, researchers at the Moorfield Institute in the UK have actually come up with and now tested a product which they actually, get a hold of this, they inject it into the eyeball. It's a new form of cellulose, and they inject it into the eyeball, and so far, of the people that they have experimented with, tried this on, over 80% are recovering from macro-degenerational blindness. Really a positive breakthrough there. What a difference that'll make for people who are suffering from that problem. Let's hope that continues, and you'll probably see it available on the market soon. Well, the World Economy reports, there's something called the World Economy Report, and they do report annually on poverty, and actually showing and this is a great example now to look at. When you look at the majority of nations show some improvement relative to poverty and number of people in poverty, dropping in most nations. But the nations where it's not dropping are African nations, and there's a direct link you can draw here. Look at the governments in Africa, the ones that are most stubbornly insistent on having policies that are based on socialism, and which means, of course, increased taxes, crazy regulations, investment fleeing, high levels of corruption, those countries are not seeing a decrease in poverty levels. Sadly, they're seeing an increase. So something to keep in mind when the country, whatever country you're in, if it's donating billions of dollars to poverty in Africa, and we should be helping impoverished nations, there should be a commitment from the receiving country, from the countries that are receiving the billions of dollars of foreign aid, to look at, there should be a commitment that they have some kind of board of advisors. They can still maintain their own national sovereignty, but who look at and advise them on whether their policies are actually, their own policies are actually increasing poverty levels, and that's the case in many countries in Africa. Well, when you look at other reports, and January is a great year or a great month to do this, because you get to look at reports that are compiled on activity in the past year. There's a group called the Real-Time Crime Index Report, and police agencies and even government agencies use this to help develop policy. So the Real-Time Crime Index has reported the biggest drop in the murder rate in 1 year ever in history in the United States. The biggest drop, over 20% drop in the murder rate in the US in 1 year. Some mainstream media outlets are reporting this, some are not, because what it's going to do is it's going to make them force media and others to go face to face with the reality that maybe when you deport violent, illegal criminals, I'm talking about violent, illegal criminals, when you have a crackdown on deporting murderers and potential murderers, guess what? The murder rate drops. But many in mainstream media, certainly Canadian mainstream media, refusing to report this huge drop in the murder rate, which underlines what I've said for years, and that is that when someone says, what exactly is Trump derangement syndrome? And that's the refusal, because of your hatred for an individual, the refusal to accept that something positive may come out of that administration. As I've said, many in mainstream media, if it was reported to be true that Trump had discovered the cure to cancer, many reporters still wouldn't take it because it's Trump. Well, talking about crime and arrests, they know how to deal with wild runaway crime in Florida, because it's just been reported that in St. Augustine, Florida, a sheriff there apprehended, yes, brace for this, a runaway emu, that's like an ostrich for you folks who may not be aware, caught the ostrich that had escaped, and the ostrich, the emu, was so good at kicking with his feet. These can be pretty upset birds when you get them riled up. But the particular officer risked life and limb, tackled the ostrich, and shackled the ostrich's legs with the handcuffs, apprehended him, and returned the escaped ostrich to its owners. No pun intended, but it looks like there was no foul play there. Maybe this report should also go to Canada, where when we have a problem with ostriches, we just slaughter them, as we did to a herd of over 400 ostriches just recently. So congrats to that deputy in St. Augustine, Florida. Birds of a feather, folks. Enjoy the day. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow.